Hello, friends, and welcome to Bible study. We're going to be in the NIV, 1 Corinthians, chapter 15, it's the rest of chapter 15, verses 29 through 58. If you're watching this, for me, the day before this recording, my mother passed away. And while for some people this may seem like a funny thing to do, we're supposed to go back to the Bible for our reassurance when we're of more than just the Christian faith, but definitely of the Christian faith. And then also, I found out after the passing of my Aunt Frances, which was not actually that long ago, that when I called to check on my mother to see how she was handling the loss of someone that she also loved, to find out that, and she was in one of her less lucid states, because this is, not even maybe a month ago, so not that long ago, that amongst, at this point in her life, when she was in one of her less lucid states, because there was dementia going on, plus medicines and such. Because if you think about it, for me, for people in my family, she checked into the ICU, the ER on Monday, and about a week before she's in ICU, and we have to take her off the respirator. So it seems very sudden. But if you think about how it usually works in hospice, what this really means is her end-of-life transition happened while she was still at home, which is what she wanted. There were resources. She didn't want them. But the end of her life did happen where it was supposed to happen. But she let me know in that time frame there, when I called to check on her, that she had narrowed her life down to some very small things, because she spent a lot of it sleeping or on medications. But she watched 3 things on YouTube, and these videos were one of them. So these videos were part of a path of peace between tensions for me and my mother. So in honor of her, we are most definitely going to be continuing them, because they bring me tremendous amounts of peace, and I get the joy of knowing they brought them to her too, because why else would you do that than if it was not your brain latching on to something that you recognized and that you wanted to see. Now, verse 29. Now, if there is no resurrection, what will those do who are baptized for the dead? If the dead are not raised at all, why are people baptized for them? So you're like, what do you mean baptized for the dead? Your apostles, your ministers, your preachers, your priests, those people whose entire jobs is to help keep people on the path that gets them to heaven, so their souls don't die. Because, all right, for the Jewish people, in this point in their culture, there's no hell. They don't believe in hell. They don't believe in hell at all. So earth is where you learn your lessons, and that's how that goes. And you learn your lessons, and and if you live your life good enough, you get to go to heaven. And this is what Paul comes from. Not just kind of comes from. He's a Pharisee. And you need to understand that that's a really big deal, because in this culture of how this works, the religious law is the law of the land. So the Sadducees are kind of like our senators now. They might have a faith, but in this case with the Sadducees, they did not believe in the afterlife at all. They didn't believe in the soul. They believed in the law of the land, in the law of Moses as the law of the land. And those types of people still exist today. And that's just a choice that one makes when they're going through life. And I'm not giving them any kind of judgment, because it's not my place to judge other people like that. Your relationship with Creator is between you and Creator, right? It's not between you and me or anything like that. I've been a minister since 2013, but I didn't start making these videos until recently, because generally other people's place, that's not how I was using this. That's not how I was using any of this, okay? I was doing a different kind of hands-on work. Verse 30. And as for us, why do we endanger ourselves at every hour? At the beginning part of the church, Paul himself was having people, back when he was Saul, having people murdered for this faith. So yeah, it was dangerous to be a Christian. People were dying. I die every day. I mean that, brothers. Just as surely as I glory over you in Christ Jesus our Lord, if I fought wild beasts in Ephesus for merely human reasons, what have I gained? If the dead are not raised. Like, what is the point? What is the point in any of the religious rules? What is the point in any of the societal norms? What is the point to any of that if this life is all we have? This fleshly life is all we have. That's his question. And everybody's got to answer that for themselves. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. It's got a little footnote on there. D. Isaiah 22:13. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Come back to your senses as you ought, and stop sinning. For there are some who are ignorant of God. I say this to your shame. So he's saying there's people in the church who don't understand that you can't be in the church and not believe that Jesus wasn't resurrected. Or Jesus could be resurrected, and, but we can't be. It's only for him. We're supposed to be following his example so that he can negotiate with the Father to raise us up. That's the point of it. He was raised. If we follow his teachings with a pureness of heart, we will be raised. He is our Messiah. We are following him. We're still following him. Alive or dead, we're following him. It doesn't matter. The resurrection of the body. Verse 35. But someone may ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body will they come? How foolish! What you sow does not come to life unless it dies. When you sow, you do not plant the body that will be, but just a seed, perhaps of wheat or of something else. But God gives it a body as he has determined. And to each kind of seed he gives its own body. Okay, so how foolish. What you sow does not come to life until it dies. God is energy. That's my particular personal opinion. When he said he made man in his own image, he was talking about our soul. Our consciousness is part of our soul. What we feel, what we think, it's who we are. It's part of our divine expression. Part of how we are a part of him. And we heal these woundings so we can be in a better communication style with him. Because we're the one acting like little children having temper tantrums when he's trying to talk to us because we have thoughts and feelings and he's trying to teach us. And we may be taking the lesson well, and we may be taking the lesson bad. And that's going to depend person to person, situation to situation, and how healed we are or aren't. If you're trying to think of heaven in the way you think of what would be heaven for this earthly body that you celebrate and should enjoy, and I'm not telling you shouldn't, then you're not getting the right concept. That's why Jesus was getting frustrated with them. With that they don't understand what I'm saying. It's because we're as a species, we're pretty slow. We are. You have to think of what it looks like to him. If you put yourself in the parent-child relationship, and I'm not saying we can know the mind of God, but just then pull yourself up to this level and analyze your reactions the way you would if you were dealing with a toddler that you have or interact with that is not getting their right to say, like, eat a cupcake for dinner every night for the rest of their life. That's what they want to do. They don't want any other food. They just want cupcakes. And if they don't get their cupcakes, they're going to throw a fit. And they're going to have these thoughts and these feelings because they really, really just want to eat that cupcake. Can't I just eat that cupcake for dinner? Why does it have to do anything bad to me? Can't I just have exactly what I want, exactly when I want it, exactly in that moment? Can't you just tell me that's good for me? And yeah, here you can have it. But it's not good for you. And it's not going to be good for you because cupcakes aren't meant to be dinner. Cupcakes are meant to be treats. It doesn't mean you can't have the treat. It just means that maybe you shouldn't have that treat every day, or maybe you can have that treat every day if you plan your meals the right way. Right? Balance is really what he's looking for here from us. And it's our lack of comprehension and being able to see the big enough of a picture because our brains, they just can't do that. We're really terrible at figuring out the long-term consequences of things. We are so, and as a species, we just acknowledge this. Because we don't believe, especially these days, unless we can see a study on it and then examine the source to make sure that we trust that source, that they are not just somebody we believe is outright trying to lie to us. We will say, you don't know that. You don't know what the long-term consequences of this, that, or the other thing is because we want to see it on a piece of paper. And I am just as guilty. I love statistics and probabilities. I love to find the statistical average across everything. So it's not even, like you could say it's projection, but it's not just projection because I am in an industry full of people who want to do that. So I'm not the only one. We do that. We have to. There's too many inputs. We cannot process all the inputs coming into us. It's far more inputs than what the computer that's up here has the ability to do. Upgrading the hardware takes a really, really long time. Just go take a look at the evolutionary theory. And instead of looking at it with, well, that's not what God said in the Bible, and start trying to take a look at it and go, yeah, God in the Bible is telling us how often we have to wash. When you were teaching your toddler how to live life, did you use the word bacteria or viruses, germs, or was it icky and yucky? Or just do what I'm telling you to do? I mean, at the start of this book, it's not even at the very beginning. We have to get to Exodus. And that means all that stuff before Exodus, our ancestors didn't know they needed to wash with water. And God had to tell them how often they have to take a shower and how often they have to clean. Wasn't really a shower, but bath, and how often they have to clean their house. Kind of like when you're teaching your children as they're growing up, right? So maybe it was our comprehension in the past that we couldn't quite understand because we weren't evolved enough. Because we are clearly, society keeps changing, so we are clearly still in a state of evolution ourselves. And that is excellent news, because that means right now in this moment is the best moment to be alive. No point in the past is any place you even want to be. You might think you want to be, but no. In the past, nothing changes. Nothing grows. It's there for us to learn from. Examine. Pick apart. Find your lesson. You're not supposed to blindly repeat it. So you are supposed to pick it apart. And that's part of the problem that we've got with the two sides in the world today when people want to argue. Because the people who say the past are there for you to learn from usually means you're not allowed to re-examine it and redefine it. But if you do that, you lose the lesson. Because you're not seeing it objectively. You're seeing it with a blind repeating of the pattern. And he said, if you blindly follow the leader, you fall by the sins they fall by. Not because they've necessarily handed it to you and you had to, but because you were handed it and you went, yummy, and you swallowed it down into your body like you didn't have to think about it. He wants an independent relationship with you. There is no future where you can't think about it and where other people are responsible for your emotional reactions or your thoughts. They might contribute to them, but that's how healed you are. And you can't give that to anybody else. You have to absorb that into yourself and then change. That's what he wants. Change. He wants you to listen to people, use your discernment, pick out the pepper from the fly shit. As the phrase is that goes back way before me. You'll have to pardon the language if that upsets you. But pick it out, as tedious as that might be. Truck all the stuff that you know comes from woundings. And take what's worthwhile. And make that grow. So you're a better version by the actions you take and the way you interact with the world, so that you're absorbing the love in your heart. We'll go back to this. Verse 30, well actually let's go back to verse 37. When you sow, you do not plant the body that will be, but just a seed, perhaps of wheat or something else. I use pepper because if you have the strength of a mustard seed, and mustard seeds are often ground up into peppercorn, and with the peppercorns to be in there. But God gives it a body as he has determined, and to each kind of seed he gives its own body. There is no one type of human being in existence, plant, animal, human, in existence, that has been brought into this world fully, right? That is not meant to be. Everyone who is born is meant to be born. It's whether we like it or not, they're meant to be born. All flesh is not the same. Men have one kind of flesh. Animals have another. Birds another. Fish another. Now here's what's interesting about this. We all have a different flesh. But the DNA, the double helix DNA that is in us in humanity, is in every living thing. Literally every plant, every animal, every bird, every fish, everything. The double helix strand. There is no exception there. And I find that to be amazing. Because we really are all connected to each other. The difference between us and them is we have more DNA. We have a higher amount of DNA in us because there's a certain amount of information stored in each one of those DNA cells that tells this 3D mass to be this 3D mass, as opposed to your 3D mass, as opposed to the plant's 3D mass. That DNA spiral is exactly the same. We are all connected to each other. Science, now unhindered and more free, it's not completely unhindered because there's still special interest groups, but religion has started to take a hands off of science. So one of those chokeholds has been removed. One of those chokeholds has been removed. So science brings us, instead of things that take us from God, things that bring us closer to God. Because to me, who very much has a job in science and loves science and loves learning and is also a minister. I mean, like, I'm extra. I've got a whole bunch of stuff going on there because learning is the favorite hobby, and I'm never going to stop engaging in that. I see the overlap. That's one of the gifts he gives me, is to see there isn't a separation. People think there's a separation. It's like foolish. That's the devil. He wants you to think it's separate and it's different and it's okay to treat somebody as if they're lesser than you, to feed your ego, because pride comes from ego. Pride is how ego displays the sin. Ego versus self-esteem, life path number 1. What is you? What is creator? Where do you start and stop? How much of people's opinions do you absorb and take into yourself to tell you how to be you? And how much of it is your source consciousness connection? I don't have an answer for you, because it's a struggle every person has to go through, and it is a struggle every person has to go through. Everybody ever has, everybody always will, no matter what life path, lifetime, no matter what your belief structure may be, all of it. There are also heavenly bodies, and by that he means the planets in the sky. And there are earthly bodies. But the splendor of the heavenly bodies is one kind. That's true. And the splendor of the earthly bodies is another. Also true. We go up into space. We've sent probes up there. We know that, Jupiter doesn't look like Earth. Like, we know it's gas. Now, there's more things that we still have to learn, because we don't yet have the technology to do all of those things. But we're working on it. And the more we learn about that, the better we understand here. And the more we learn about there, we understand here better. Because as it turns out, when this solar system is forming, it's collecting. So think about it, how we have an asteroid belt roaming around the edges of our solar system, just swinging around out there. Where did all those chunks of rock come from? Where'd they come from? They didn't just materialize there. How does the solar system work? I mean, this is grade school if you're in America. You have to think about the creation process in the first place. The sun has one kind of splendor, and by that he means our star, our sun, right? And the moon, another. And the stars, another. And a star differs from star in splendor. This is very true. Some stars that we see in the sky are stars, and some are suns. Our sun is a star. Some of those stars are suns that went out, and we just hasn't caught up with us because of the amount of time it takes for light to travel. And other times, there's one that's about to go supernova, because there is a path for suns going supernova. The reality is that stars, which is what suns are, have nuclear reactions going on inside them. We don't get any new information for ourselves. We keep repeating what God has shown us. And they has more nuclear reactions going on in there than we could ever even conceive to create here. We don't have that ability. We can't find the fuel source that you can burn that makes more power than the fuel source originating from it. Every piece of fuel source has potential energy in it. Like, for instance, my bookmark. I like to keep this bookmark here for in this Bible. This comes from the World Wildlife Organization. I love animals. And I just find it to be appropriate because, to me, Jesus is a lion. Then that's Leo, which is the season that we're in. And it's ruled by the sun. And I know, astrology. It's okay. For me, it's a tool. It's a comprehension and an understanding. Not a thing I live my life by. Just sort of like reading any science textbook. contextualizing my world so I can better process and understand. Now, in this, there's only so much fuel. And then a sun like ours goes to a different kind of sun. It becomes a dwarf red star. This is what we've seen. Now, does that mean it's guaranteed to happen here? No. And scientists can't really tell you. Just like, because we can't really get instruments in there, so we don't know how much fuel source is in there. We don't really know. But we're about to have a dwarf red star go supernova in our night sky, and we'll be able to observe it through telescopes. As it turns out in the creation of a solar system, what keeps a solar system stable is the gravity of the other planets around it, locking it into a rotation around the sun, which has the highest gravitational pull. And then we all are swirling around there in this wobble that really only stays in place by the grace of God, go we, in my opinion, because things are whipping around up there all the time, and it's really the gravitational pull that keeps anything from colliding into each other, which doesn't seem by accident to me. But if people who are only in science, like the Sadducees, don't want to see the faith, then that's their choice, and I will let them have it. But this is how I perceive it, because this is how it makes sense to me, and it still leads me back to God. So to me, it doesn't matter. And that's why I get confused with everybody wanting to force all of their things. You got to understand your world. You got to be in it. The stars do differ in splendor, but the material makeup is the same. When a solar system is coming together to find that gravitational pull, it's messy. Everything is colliding together. Transformation is messy. For the butterfly, it's a biochemical reaction. For you, it's a biochemical reaction. And so is true up there in space when it's all smashing together. As it all smashes together to form things, it means that potential energy, which is in everything, which is part of the study of mechanical engineering, is which fuel source gives us the right kind of potential energy to get us the maximum temperature difference from this piece of machinery that we want to use to change the temperature in the water, the air, the whatever it is, to change your environmental conditions to make them more pleasant for you. That's part of how it's a service to humanity. So, in that change with its mess, you get things that are coming from all over the place. Every time a comet hits a planet, it's introducing into that environment whatever was on it. This is a concept we can understand. He's also saying this is true about a lot of other things. They are all equal, and they are all necessary to make anything happen anywhere. Even the stars that are dying in their explosive force, any life that was left, any bacteria, any of that, is going to go out with that explosive force, and it's going to collide into something in space, because it's going to just keep going until it hits something, because there's no gravity in space. Can you predetermine for God how he works his wonders? Or do you want to sit back and watch and be in awe? I like to sit back and watch and be in awe. Trying to predetermine for him. We're all on his timeline, and he gets what he wants anyway, so fighting against its futility to me. There's no it's not futile to fight the opposition, because he has no real power and he just wants to trick you. It is futile to try to fight God. That's my opinion. And I'm most definitely going to stick to it, because I have found nothing else works for me. Verse 42. So will it be with the resurrection of the dead? The body that is sown is perishable. These vessels aren't meant to last forever. Just like everything that we have in this world that we emulate off of everything that we see from God, because that's where all of our machines and all the rest of that come from, parts eventually break down. It's built to be perishable. Just like the 3D objects you have around you release energy when they decompose in whatever way they're going to decompose, because they might need different types of introductions of, I don't know, chemical reactions or whatever else there might be. So are we. So it release energy. Because we release energy every moment. That's another thing mechanical engineering says. You generate heat. You generate heat because you're full of potential energy and you're moving around, and that's called kinetic energy, and you release heat. Quantum entanglement says that heat you're releasing has to go someplace else. Because life has to be in balance, and things are in balance, so it must go someplace else. It must keep expanding. And that's why the theory of the universe is it continues to expand, because we even exist. We help the universe expand without doing anything other than living our average, everyday lives. It is sown in dishonor, but it is raised in glory, our body. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, and it is raised a spiritual body. There is electricity running through you. That's not a maybe. How do we tell if somebody is still alive when they're in a coma? What's the first thing we do? Well, they got a heartbeat. They're breathing, hopefully on their own. Oh, do they have brainwave patterns? Or are they brain dead? Right? Those are those parts of those end-of-life decisions we all have to make. What do we want? When do we feel is the right time? If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. So it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam, a life-giving spirit. The last Adam is Jesus, in case that confuses you. Every Jewish person can trace their genetics to Adam. I myself have thought about this because I know it's a very small percentage of Jewish DNA that's in me, but because of the work of other people who work in DNA, as opposed to me, who is a fan of the information I gather from it. And those are two separate things. I can tell you that I am of the tribe of Levi. So, a descendant of Aaron, a daughter of Aaron. So, Aaron to Levi, Levi to Jacob, Jacob to Isaac, Isaac to Abraham, Abraham to Shem, Shem to Noah, Noah to Lamech, Lamech to Methuselah, Methuselah to Enoch. And then you can just keep going backwards, right? I like to stop at Enoch. Because yes, I can go back to Adam and Eve, but Enoch is where I want to focus. Why? Enoch is now known by another name. The Archangel Metatron. So I know, and this is part of what every Jewish person has to know, this is part of the battle of ego versus self-esteem. Have your ancestors done it? Yes. You have seen the living example. The stories have been told. There's a path, there's a way. It's narrow. Are you willing to walk it? Because sometimes you're going to upset people, and they're not going to like you because you're going to say things they don't like. Far too many people are looking for the loophole instead of following the immaculate path. The spiritual did not come first, but the natural after the spiritual. Which for me is also a whole other type of thing when you're thinking about it on an energetic plane. Because there's like natural law, which natural law, you're going to eye for an eye. Consequences for actions, life and death, a balance of things. You can't treat people poorly and then think you get rewarded kind of thing. If you're terrible to people long enough, the consequences for those actions come back to haunt you. You have to treat people as, these are natural things. If you're aggressive with people, they'll be aggressive with you. They're basic things, natural things. Things that are even obeyed in the animal kingdom. We are part of the animal kingdom. The myth is that we think we're not part of this world and we just rule this world, but we're of this world and made of this world. So by instinct, by our subconscious mind, which is between 3 and 7 years old, and it's why you still like some of the things that you used to like when you were a kid, and I say you should celebrate that, kid. That's the natural law. Spiritual law. That's this. So it was written. The first man, Adam, became a living being, and the last, Adam, a life-giving spirit. The spiritual did not come first, but the natural, and after that the spiritual. The first man was of the dust of the earth, the second man from heaven. As was the earthly man, so are those who are of the earth. And as is the man from heaven, so are those who are of heaven. And just as we have been born the likeness of the earthly man, so we bear the likeness of the man of heaven. And it does give a footnote there. And that is, all right, sometimes it's some early. Let's reread that with some early. And just as we have been born the likeness of the earthly man, so shall we. So, some early, bear the likeness of the man of heaven. No, I don't think I like that. I don't think that flows. That sounds weird to me. You can tell me what you think in the comments down below. Verse 50. I declare to you, brother, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Anything that's perishable on this earth that can break down into just energy does not go to heaven. It's the energy that goes to heaven, as energy, instead of, like this pencil with its, look at that. Isn't that ridiculous? I just wasn't, it was like, nope, we're not slowing down Bible study for this ridiculousness. Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. So you're not getting into heaven in your current state, is what Paul is saying. No matter how good you are, you're not getting into heaven in your current state, because it's not really about goodness or badness. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable. I have a thing hanging up in my house. It came from my Aunt Mary, her house. Because it used to hang up in her house, and then my parents started hanging up in their house, and now I have it hanging up in my home because it's got really, really good advice. It says, nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune. There's much debate about who wrote that poem. Some people say it was Max Ehrman. Desereta, if you want to go look it up. I love it. I've actually sewn it on pillows and given it away to people. And the mortal with the immortality. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that it is written will come true. Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? I got a footnote with B. Hosea 13:14. The sting of death is sin, and the power of the sin is law. So before I finish these last two verses, I like to read the footnotes. The footnotes are always important, always, in anything. Read the footnotes because they're your context for anything is coming from. So just as any good research documentation or dissertation or white paper or anything that you're trying to prove to someone, you cite your source. So Paul is citing his sources, but his sources is a spiritual topic, so he's going to source prophets. The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, he gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Anything you do in the Lord's name that actually helps people around you is not in vain, even if not all people appreciate it or understand it. In the end, your relationship with Creator is yours and His alone. He's not going to let other people in. You have to decide if you're going to let other people in. The dark can't disturb Him. He is the light. He's the light in a way. The hard time that we're having these days is understanding that narrow footpath in that light in the way is not meant to look identical for everyone. It's meant to teach each of us the lessons we need so we can progress forward in life and be the better versions of ourselves from our inner heart where it really matters.